Okay, so it's 9:30 Eastern, so we'll go ahead and begin the meeting for the North American Numbering Council. My name is Jordan Reth. I'm the current acting designated federal officer. I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. And I'd also like to thank the FCC staff for all their help in organizing and executing the NANC meetings, particularly our CMR staff who continue to keep everything running so smoothly in this small virtual environment. So with that, I will turn the meeting over to the NANC chair, Jennifer McKee.
Great, thank you very much, Jordan. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the meeting. Thank you for joining us. This is our second meeting of 2021. Welcome to members of the public who are watching via our live stream. And if you have any questions, we encourage you to submit them to livequestions@fcc.gov. And then we will read those questions during the public participation portion of the meeting. Before we begin, I just wanted to remind all the council members some of the best practices we have for these virtual meetings so that we can make sure everything runs as smoothly as possible. First is please keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking. Also, you can use the video function if you'd like, but it is not required for this meeting. If you have a question or if you would like to make a comment during our discussion times, please use the raise hand feature. So Jordan and I will both be able to monitor the raise hand function to see if anyone is using it. And then you are the one who controls that feature. So once you have been recognized and your point has been made, please unclick the hand so that we know that you have been addressed. When you're speaking, please identify yourself so we may not recognize your voice. And then again, please remember to go back on mute when you're done speaking. So those are our basic ground rules. Does anyone have any questions on those before we proceed? Okay, no. We're all pretty familiar with it by now, I guess. So once again, as a reminder, members of the public with questions for the NANC, we're asked to submit them via the FCC's electronic comment filing system, and any members of the public that are watching via the live stream can do so now by sending it via email to livequestions@fcc.gov. And then again, we will address any of the questions we got either through ECFS or through the email during the public participation portion a little bit later on. Now, before we begin the actual meeting, I understand Rich Shockey has an updated disclosure that he would like to make. Rich, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. As I, pardon me, as I disclosed at the last NANC meeting, I have a private contract with Ofcom, the British telecom regulator, to provide them with a snapshot report of the state of stir shaken and call authentication in the United States and in Canada. And I recuse myself from any participation in those discussions at the NANC. However, after discussing this matter further with the Office of General Counsel, they have informed me that I am no longer required to recuse myself from call authentication discussions. And in any event, this contractual obligation would end at the end of April. So I'm free to speak if necessary.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Rich. We appreciate that update. Let's see, I saw there was a hand raised, but now it's down. Does anyone else have any disclosures that they need to make at this time? Okay, if not, then I will turn the meeting back over to our acting designated federal officer, Jordan Reth, who will conduct our roll call. Jordan?
Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, I'll start with 800 response.
Hi, this is Heather Barrows.
Thank you, Heather. ACA Connects. Brian and Michael, what's going on? Okay. Ad hoc telecommunications.
Hi, this is Susan Gately.
Thanks, Susan. Addis.
Good morning, this is Jackie Welchman.
AT&T.
Yeah, good morning. Allow you, Fusi.
All right. Bandwidth?
Greg Rogers is on for bandwidth.
Thank you, Greg.
And LJ Freeman?
Thanks, LJ. Charter Communications?
Good morning. This is Betty Sanders.
Thank you, Betty. Comcast?
And Glenn Clip was also on with Charter Communications. Good morning.
Thank you both. Good morning. Comcast?
Good morning. Tim Cagle on for Comcast.
And Beth Rose is on as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim and Beth. Competitive Carriers Association?
It's Alexi Maltis for CCA.
Thank you, Alexa. CTIA?
Hi, it's Matt Gerst, the CTIA.
Thanks, Matt. Google? Okay. Encompass?
Good morning, everyone. It's Chris Shipley for Encompass.
Thank you, Chris. Intrado?
Good morning. Bob McCosman is here, Jordan.
Thanks, Bob. NARUC? Commissioner Peterson or Rosalie, are you on? Okay, Nasuka? Ari? Okay, Nevada PUC?
Good morning, this is Haley Williamson.
Good morning, Chair Williamson. NTCA?
Good morning, Brian Flores here from NTCA.
Thank you, Brian. Peerless?
Hi, Jordan, and everyone. This is Julie Ost.
Hi, Julie. Thank you. SIP Forum, Rich? We knew that Rich is on. He just made his disclosure. T-Mobile?
Good morning. This is Rosemary Leist.
Good morning.
And Scott Firemuth.
Good morning. Thank you both. TDS Telecommunications?
Good morning. Paul Douglas here.
Thank you, Paul. Telnix?
Good morning. David Kasem here.
Good morning, David. Twilio?
Rebecca Thompson for Twilio.
Thank you, Rebecca. US Connect?
Good morning, all. Bridget Alexander White is here.
Thank you, Bridget. US Telecom?
Good morning. Christine Hackman is on.
Thank you, Christine. Verizon?
Good morning, Dana Crandall here.
Thanks, Dana. Vonage?
Good morning. Colin Brown is here.
Thank you, Colin. And Washington UTC? Rebecca, are you on? Okay. iConnective?
Chris Drake is here.
Thank you, Chris. And Somos?
Hi, Ann Berkowitz is here.
Thank you, Ann.
And Joel Bernstein.
And Joel, thank you both. All right, that concludes our roll call. I'll turn the meeting back over to Chair McKee.
Thank you, Jordan. So I'm pleased to welcome this morning Dan Kahn, who is the Associate Bureau Chief for the Wireline Competition Bureau, to make some opening remarks. Dan, the call is yours.
Good morning, Chair McKee, members of the NANC, and welcome to everybody who's watching this meeting online. Today marks nearly a year since we began our meetings in a virtual-only setting. We've appreciated your ready adoption of this approach and your continued commitment to the Council's work as you face increased professional and personal responsibilities. We really hope to see you all together in person soon. Many of you have applied to continue working with the NANC after we recharter this September, and we're very grateful for your continued interest. Your work on the critical issues that impact our nation's telecommunications systems and infrastructures has never been more important. At the last Council meeting, you discussed the feasibility and costs of including geolocation capabilities with the 988 call, and thank you very much for that informative discussion. As you know, 988 is the 3-digit dialing code for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and will be effective beginning on July 16, 2022. The importance of this resource can't be overstated. The Council's work has been integral to the continued development and implementation of the 988 3-digit code, which will be a literal lifeline for vulnerable Americans. As you know, in some areas, covered providers will need to implement 10-digit dialing in those regions that use both 7-digit dialing and 988 as the first 3 digits of a 7-digit number. The North American Numbering Plan Administrator, providers, and states are currently working together toward implementation. This involves both the technical work needed to implement mandatory 10-digit dialing, as well as educating consumers about the transition. I'd like to preview some important dates regarding 988 implementation in this regard. Permissive 10-digit dialing in pertinent areas begins on April 24th of this year. Consumers should begin dialing 10 digits, that is, the area code and the 7-digit number, for all local calls. If the consumer forgets and dials just 7 digits, the call will still be completed at that time. However, mandatory 10-digit dialing begins on October 24th. At that time, consumers must dial the full 10 digits, that is, the area code plus the 7-digit number, for all local calls. On and after that date, local calls completed with only 7 digits may not be completed, and a recording will inform consumers that their call cannot be completed as dialed. Consumers must hang up and dial again using the area code and the 7-digit number. And, most excitingly of all, effective July 16 of 2022, as I mentioned earlier, dialing the 3-digit 988 code will route all calls to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. However, phone calls aren't the only way in which Americans in crisis seek help. Americans, including particularly Americans in groups who are at heightened risk of suicide, rely in particular on texting to communicate. To provide Americans in crisis as many easy ways to reach help as possible, next week, during the Commission's open meeting, the Commission will consider a further notice of proposed rulemaking that explores making it possible to reach the Lifeline by sending text messages to 988. Later today, we'll hear from Emily Kaditz, an attorney advisor in the Wireline Competition Bureau, who will explain more about this further notice of proposed rulemaking and text to 988. In addition to 988, caller ID authentication using STIR/SHAKEN remains an important focus for the Commission. There are a number of important deadlines approaching that I want to remind you of. All voice service providers not subject to an extension must implement STIR/SHAKEN on their Internet Protocol networks by June 30 of this year. We'll announce the Robocall Mitigation Database filing deadline very soon. This public database will help ensure that only voice traffic from providers that have either fully implemented caller ID authentication or that have implemented a robocall mitigation program will traverse the U.S. voice network. We're excited about moving forward with STIR/SHAKEN implementation, and I will preview with you shortly some potential new work for the Call Authentication Trust Anchor Working Group. Thank you to everybody for your important work on this topic, including my particular thanks to the Governance Authority, which we'll present here shortly. I would also like to thank the Council's Standing Working Group for Numbering Administration Oversight, which has been developing performance measures for the newly established Reassigned Number Database Administrator. The Reassigned Number Database Administrator website went live on March 22nd and is now available. Providers began registering on April 1st, and data submissions for larger providers are due today, April 15th. Smaller providers will have an additional 6 months to submit until October 15th. The administrator of the database will begin reporting monthly on the 15th, beginning this May. Stay tuned for when the database will be available to callers. Many thanks to the Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group for all its efforts and hard work in developing performance measures and for its continued oversight of the Reassigned Numbering Database Administrator. Before I conclude, I'll turn next to previewing next steps for the Call Authentication Trust Anchor Working Group. And those are, we'll be asking them to issue reports covering 3 areas. The first will be to issue a set of best practices relating to how terminating voice service providers can best protect their subscribers using caller ID authentication information. Second, to report on the implementation of STIR/SHAKEN by small providers, including best practices. And third, to recommend steps to encourage the adoption of caller ID authentication technology and other policy changes to combat robocalls by policymakers and providers in countries outside of the United States, especially when the adoption of those practices will benefit U.S. consumers. To conclude, I just want to say thank you again for all of your hard work and time in public service. We appreciate it. I'll turn the call back to Chair McKee.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you very much for being with us this morning and for your remarks. And also thank you for that preview of the upcoming CADA working group charges. We thank you. Now I will move on to our announcements and recent news. And I would like to acknowledge that our former Vice Chair, Bruce Williamson's term with the Maine Public Utilities Commission concluded at the end of March, and he has resigned his position with the council. Bruce was wonderful to work with, and I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say he will be greatly missed here at the NANC. We wish him and his family the very best. Now, the next part of our agenda is an update from Brent Struthers, who is the Director of the Secure Telephone Identity Governance Authority. Brent, the call is yours.
Thank you, Chairman McKee. Can you all hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Wonderful. All right. First, on behalf of the SDIG, I would like to thank Associate GCOM for his recognition of our work. We're excited to see the trends in service provider registration. Thank you all, as always, for allowing us to come here and present. Let me get into the presentation. If you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. I will perform a little bit of a sleight of hand here. You may look at that chart there. That's what we officially call the Glenn chart, Glenn graph, Glenn Klepper graph, because he was the one who asked for it. So that's the Glenn graph. You may note that the line goes up to maybe about 150, 147. So that line was actually, that chart was actually put together at the end of March, and do that monthly for the STIGA. So as you can see, at the end of March, we had about 147 service providers. I updated those numbers when I sent this presentation to Jordan Reth last week, and it was about 154. But as of today, we stand at about 168 service providers authorized. So you can see the trends are going upward. There's also another 40 or so service providers that are approved and through the testing staging process. They're finishing up their final paperwork before becoming active. We've got roughly another 100 or so more pending in the process of registration at some point. So you can see, we've had a market increase in SP authorization since the first of the year. We've certainly more than doubled from the start of 2021. We began 2021 with about 74 service providers. Our goal, the STIGA's goal, is to ensure that the PA systems are ready, not just for the increase in service provider registrations this year, but that the Shaken framework we set up is stable for years to come. So with that, can you go to the next slide, please? Certification authorities. There's been one more added since I last updated the NANC. We the board approved GBSD as the 9th STICA and the 7th STICA to serve the broader industry. There's two more approved STICAs that serve their own companies. It's T-Mobile and Comcast. So, but we do have 7 of them serving the broader industry. We also have a new policy decisions binder. So if you've gone up to look for the STIGA policies before, we had 4 or 5 policies that were posted separately. So now we've got them all in one binder. It's been posted on the STIGA resource page. It consolidates all of the board policies in one document, and we'll continue to update that as the policies change. Speaking of policy changes, one of those future changes is already noted in the binder, and that's the change of the 3rd prong of the SBC token access policy. Who can actually get the SBC tokens? The 3rd prong of the policy currently requires the service provider to have direct access to telephone numbers from the NAPA or the pooling administrator. As Associate GCOM mentioned, there is going to be an announcement made soon about the FCC's robocall mitigation program certification database. When that on the effective date of that, when service providers have to file their certifications with the FCC, the new policy for SBC token access will be that a service provider has filed a certification in that database. So the board is waiting, like everybody else, for the public notice from the FCC, and when we get that public notice, we'll know better the date that the new SBC token access policy will go into place, and we'll send out some type of advisory or notice on that. The board's also nearing completion of 2 separate policy change requests, one on delegate certificates and one on toll-free call authentication. There may be changes required in multiple board policies to support both delegate certificates and toll-free authentication. Those changes will be announced in the industry, and we'll update the policy decisions binder with the new information. We're getting close on those. Finally, if you can go to the last slide. And I won't go through this in any detail. If you want to read the comments, they're up on the FCC's website in docket 1797. But the ADIS on behalf of the STIGA board did file comments with the FCC and the FCC's FNPRM on the FCC role in the board's SBC token revocation process. So again, if you're looking to read those, they're in Wireline Competition Bureau docket 1797. And the board fully supports the FCC's review of the board's SBC token revocation decision. And if you want to read the rest of the comments, they're up there. And that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer. All right, Chair McKee, looks like I get off easy once again.
Okay, thank you very much, Brent. Thanks for your presentation. Okay, the next on the agenda, we will hear from Teresa Patton, the co-chair of the North American Portability Management, LLC. Teresa, the call is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. In regards to recent statements of work and contract amendments, there's only been one statement of work that's been approved since the last report. SOW 27 is a no-cost SOW requested by the NPIF, or Number Portability Industry Forum, in support of Change Order 554, which enhances the XML LSMS query recovery process. In regards to NPAC updates and upcoming releases, the disaster recovery / failover exercise was successfully held on February 20th and 21st. And release 5.0.2 of the NPAC is targeted for an April 25th deployment and will be deployed in all regions in a single maintenance window. And this release contains operational improvements. The Contract Implementation Committee approved 7 new PTRS user applications, and the 2021 qualification certification process for PTRS users has been kicked off, and reapplications were due by March 26th. A 30-day grace period has been instituted for users to complete this process, but any users not in compliance by May 25th may have NPAC data access revoked. During this annual certification process, there were 11 PTRS users that determined that they no longer need access to NPAC data and will not be reapplying. And that's all for the NAPM. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Next up, we're going to hear updates from our Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group. And presenting on behalf of the group is co-chair Phil Lindsay. Phil, the call is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair McKee. My name is Philip Lindsay. I'm with Lumen Technologies. I am one of the co-chairs of the Number Administration Oversight Working Group. I share that role with Bob McCausland of Intrado Communications, as well as Betty Sanders of Charter. We have a few FCC liaisons I'd like to mention because they're integral in the work that we do. Bill Anderley, Merva Charles, and Karen Schroeder. Sorry, Karen. Our area of responsibility is the Number Administration Oversight Working Group that oversees the activities and reviews the performance of the North American Numbering Plan Administrator, or NAMPA, and the Billing and Collections Agent, as also provides oversight of Number Portability Administration and the newly developed reassigned numbers database. And when I say developed, I mean the process anyway. So the FCC contract oversight of the following vendors is the Billing and Collections Agent, the North American Numbering Plan Administrator, and the Reassigned Numbers database administrator. And then also oversight of the number portability industry forum, as we've got indicated there. On the next slide. The contract status, recently there was an award of the NAPA R&D. It's a combined contract. It went effective December 1st of last year, and it will expire in November of 2025. Similarly, the BNC agent contract went effective on May 1st of 2018 and will expire in April of 2023. Our contract oversight activity since the last meeting includes the monthly review of deliverables, the monthly report development, evaluation matrix development, the NAPA system development, and the 988 implementation status. In addition, with regard to the R&D, we have additionally the monthly report development, evaluation matrix development, and the reporting data into the R&D issues that we discuss on these calls. The monthly review deliverables of the BNC agent include the NAPA financial monthly report and the R&D financial monthly report as well. And then L&P oversight, which is the number portability industry forum. Regarding NAPA, NAPA has, as I previously mentioned, the newly awarded contract, and this includes the combining of the number administration system, or NAS, and the pooling administration, or also known as PAS, and the routing number administration, or RNAS. We reviewed monthly NAPA reports. We completed the combined NAPA monthly reports. As we previously, those were separate contracts. We had separate reports, and so there was tremendous work led by co-chairs and other, well, specifically Karen Rippenkroger of T-Mobile. Appreciate your efforts on leading that for the NAPA. And we completed that, and now we have a new report moving forward. So the work also completed the development of the evaluation matrix to help simplify and help provide a good checklist on the vendor performance. NAPA anticipates its completion of this NAS, the combination of those systems in the latter part of second quarter of 2020. In addition, we receive updates associated with 988 implementation, as the NAPA is essentially project managing a lot of the 10-digit dialing transition on that, as was mentioned earlier in the opening remarks by Associate Bureau Chief Khan. The meetings are held, there were meetings held on February 11th and March 11th to provide update milestones to the transition from 7 to 10 digits in MPAs where 988 is also an NXX, or those first 3 digits of a 7-digit telephone number. Additional information can be found at the NAPA website with this link here. This reporting will conclude upon the nationwide 988 implementation on July 16th, 2020. The R&DA monthly reporting metrics with regard to RNDA, the RNDA monthly reporting metrics development was also complete. I want to thank Bob McCausland, one of our co-chairs, for leading that effort. They completed the monthly reporting metrics or report, and the matrix for evaluation matrix as well. The RNDA also held webinars on March 5th and March 12th regarding the service provider reporting data into the R&D. informational FAQs provided to service providers and service provider initial reporting of the R&D, which is today, April 15th. It's based on kind of my anecdotal information. There were some minor glitches, some issues, but I think for the most part, folks were able to successfully get their data uploaded, at least up to this point. There still may be some outstanding issues, but it seems as though there are successes associated with providers being able to report into the database. So establishment of the R&D websites was made, or we established those. The R&DA website is identified here, as well as an FCC website as well. Additional information is being provided ongoing. There are updates being provided by the R&DA as issues get addressed, that are discovered as we go through this new process of uploading this data into the database. Regarding the BNC agent, I just wanted to put down kind of some of the things that the BNC agent is responsible for. You will see this in the monthly reports, the financial position, the changes in fund balance, deliverables, the R&D fund monthly review. Again, once that gets established, and there will be some point at which that review will sunset once providers begin receive funds back based on the upfront funding of the R&D. So the 2021-2022 contribution factors also will be reviewed in a draft form in the upcoming meeting, and will ultimately be finalized and then approved in the June NANC meeting. Number portability industry forum. We have the tri-chairs, Deb Tucker with Verizon, Teresa Patton with AT&T, and Randy Ryan of Comcast. We have the schedule for the regular scheduled meeting, as was indicated earlier in the NAPM report. There's work being done, and that work is progressing. There is no information or no indication that there's any action for the NANC at this time on any of the projects that are being worked within the MPIF, and this group will bring those forward if there is an issue that needs NANC attention. So, and then with regard to our membership, we want to acknowledge the folks on the team. This is a list of those of the companies that are members of the NAOWG. Appreciate all the input we get from our membership. We have a high level of participation, and it makes the work of the NAOWG a lot easier with the high level of participation that we receive. So I want to extend my thanks to our membership. Slide.
Morning.
Our future meetings, our meetings for 2021 have been established. I've highlighted or asterisked a few dates that have changed since we initially set our schedule due to the schedule of the NANC meetings that came out subsequent to our initial calendar schedule. If you have any questions regarding the NAOWG or any of these dates, please let me know. And we've got contact information here for myself, Mr. McCausland, and Ms. Sanders. If you have any questions, please reach out to any one of us. And I can Unless there's questions, I can hand it back to Chair McKee.
Great. Thank you very much, Phil, for the presentation. I appreciate it. And also thank you to the members of the NAOWG for all of the continued work that you're doing. So next on our agenda, we will hear from Emily Keditz of the Wireline Competition Bureau, and she will give us a briefing on the text to 988 NPRM, which is currently before the commission. Emily, the call is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Kaditz, an attorney advisor here in the Wireline Competition Bureau, and I'll provide a brief overview of the text to 988 further notice of proposed rulemaking. So first, we would really like to thank the NANC again for its help throughout the 988 proceeding. We're happy to get to continue to benefit from the NANC's insights as we consider how to make the Lifeline more widely available and accessible to all Americans. So first, just a brief overview of 988 and today's presentation. As a reminder, in July 2020, the Commission previously adopted a report and order that designated 988 as the 3-digit code for the Lifeline. And as Dan Kahn mentioned, covered providers must implement 988 by July 16th, 2022. We also remind everyone that 988 is not active nationwide, and to call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, call 1-800-273-TALK. Though we have been pleased to see that several providers, including T-Mobile and Verizon Mobile Service, have recently made voice calling to 988 available to customers. So today's presentation will cover text to 988's background, the further notice of proposed rulemaking, and next steps. Next slide, please. So text messaging is a popular mode of communication. Americans sent over 2.1 million text messages in 2019, and it is particularly popular with communities that are at higher risk of suicide and mental health crises, including teens, young adults, and individuals who are deaf, hard of hearing, deaf, blind, or have speech disabilities. We also observed that the Lifeline recently soft launched texting service and began responding to texts received on the Lifeline's toll-free number, presently the existing Lifeline 800 number. The Veterans Crisis Line, which phone callers to the Lifeline may reach by pressing 1, also operates a texting service available at a 6-digit short code. Both the Veterans Crisis Line and the Lifeline also respond to online chats. Next slide, please. So to increase the effectiveness of the Lifeline, on April 22nd, the Commission will consider a further notice of proposed rulemaking that, if adopted, would propose to require and seek comment on requiring CMRS providers and interconnected text messaging service providers, together termed covered text providers, to support text messaging to 988 by routing text to 988 to the Lifeline's toll-free number. Given the pervasiveness of text messaging and its popularity with at-risk groups, the further notice tentatively concludes that ensuring that Americans in crisis can text 988 is likely to save lives. The further notice proposes and/or seeks comment on issues regarding routing text messages to the Lifeline, defining the providers and text messages covered under possible text to 988 rules, the implementation deadline for possible text to 988 rules, technical considerations, bounce back messaging, and other issues relating to possibly requiring covered text providers to support texting to 988. Next slide, please. So first, the further notice would propose and seek comment on requiring covered text providers to support texting to 988 by routing text messages to 988 to the Lifeline's current 10-digit number. We also seek comment on possible alternatives, such as routing text messages directly to a local Lifeline crisis center or to the closest Veterans Crisis Line crisis center. Second, the further notice would propose and seek comment on establishing a definition of 988 text message that sets the outer bound of text messages to 988 that covered text providers may be required to support, as well as directing the Wireline Competition Bureau to identify specific text formats within this definition that covered text providers must support, which we propose to be covered 988 text messages. The further notice would propose to model the definition of 988 text message on the definition of text message that Congress enacted in 2018 in the context of Truth in Caller ID requirements, and we seek comment on possible alternative models. But specifically, the further notice proposes to define a 988 text message as a message consisting of text, images, sounds, or other information that is transmitted to or from a device that is identified as the receiving or transmitting device by means of a 10-digit telephone number, N11 service code, or 988, and includes short message service messages and multimedia service messages, but does not include real-time two-way voice or video communications or messages sent over an IP-enabled messaging service to another user of the same messaging service, except an SMS or MMS message. The further notice also proposes that, as an initial matter, the Commission should require covered text providers to support transmission of SMS messages to 988, since this is what the Lifeline can presently receive. Third, the further notice would seek comment on and propose adopting a uniform nationwide implementation deadline for all covered text providers and covered 988 text messages. The further notice also seeks comment on what date the Commission should adopt for our implementation deadline. Next slide, please. So fourth, the further notice would seek comment on the specific technical considerations that are necessary to implement texting to 988. For example, we see comment on possible upgrades that covered text providers would have to make to their network to support text to 988 capability. Fifth, the further notice would seek comment on whether and in what circumstances to require covered text providers to send automatic bounce back messages to consumers where text to 988 service is unavailable. And finally, the further notice would propose to direct the Wireline Competition Bureau to continue to coordinate the implementation of 988 with the Commission's federal partners, the Department of Health and Human Services, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and the Department of Veterans Affairs, and seeks comment on other issues, including the Commission's legal authority and cost recovery. Next slide, please. So possible next steps. If adopted, the Commission will receive comments and response to the text to 988 further notice in May or June, and will then evaluate the record. Next slide. So provided here is my contact information as well as a link to the further notice. Does anyone have any questions? Hearing none, thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Emily. We really appreciate that, helpful presentation and the preview of the item that's before the Commission. Okay, oh, thanks, Emily. Now we have the public participation portion of the meeting. And as I mentioned earlier, the public notice for this meeting, which was released on March 2nd, members of the public were directed to submit any comments via the Commission's electronic comment filing system, ECFS, in docket number CC 92-237. Does the FCC staff see any comments from members of the public filed in the docket?
Hi, this is Jordan. No, at this time we don't see any public comment in the Nancy docket.
Okay, thanks, Jordan. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, people who are participating publicly through the live questions.fcc.gov email address also could submit questions while the meeting was going on. Have we received any questions via email?
Hi, Jordan again. No, at this time it doesn't appear that there have been any public questions received via the live questions inbox.
Okay, thanks again, Jordan. All right, then, before we conclude, is there any other business that anyone wants to bring before the Nancy? Okay, if not, then our next Nancy meeting is scheduled for June 23rd. Please make sure that is on your calendars. Anything from the Commission, Jordan?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, then if there's nothing else, thank everyone very much for participating this morning. We appreciate your time. Please stay safe, and the meeting is adjourned.